How are you?
I'm good. Figuring all this tech stuff out.
Yeah, look at you using Zoom like a pro.
It's pretty big. Oh, Jeremy. Two Jeremies.
Yeah, I like this. I like these numbers.
Yes, it could just be me and a bunch of Jeremies. That'd be
I love
amazing.
it. It sounds like a band.
It certainly could be. And Jeremy, you with your hair down, you look like a band leader.
There you go.
Cool. Expecting a few more, so we'll just kind of hang out and see.
Sweet.
Everything is recording. I had to be like, am I recording to the cloud? Am I recording to my computer? So I figured it out. It's cloud.
Okay. All right.
So I'm working with a MacBook Air. So
Me too.
so I don't think it. Oh, one more. G-Funk. Getting in it.
Can't hear it.
Hey, Gary.
The cleanest audio known to humankind.
Might have a microphone.
Oh,
Yeah.
snazzy.
Gary, can you hear us? Oh, you're making some noise, but I can't hear. Can you other guys hear him?
No.
Nope.
I hear you, man. Tech stuff.
Right.
I would
I've gotten.
I have like an IT guy for the website. I literally would pay him to be like, get this ready for me.
Yep.
Because question marks. But
I've been using Zoom with all my clients for over a year now, and it's like good, except for this one client who every call has a new problem. Like he's on a different device and it doesn't work for a different reason. It's crazy.
And then you also have to IT troubleshoot.
Yep. Which I'm not great at.
And I'm curious. Still trying. A lot of static there.
Gary.
Yeah, because if I mute him, that static goes away. So
Yeah. That's a good. I was gonna say, feel free to mute people.
yeah. Can't hear you, Gary.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, hello. We can hear
Hi,
you.
Gary. Hi, Chris. How are you guys doing?
Hello. Very well.
Perfect.
I'm gonna mute Gary for a little while longer as he figures it out because he's got a little static, but tech stuff. Are you? You look like you have the makeup on for some recent poll stuff. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
We had an exotic class today, so I put on something, extra for every week.
I see.
Yeah.
How about now, Gare? Okay.
Okay. Ooh.
Yeah. What time is it in Turkey?
11.
Okay, at night.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
This is the best time for us. No job.
I know.
Nothing.
I'm all like,
it's not that late.
Oh,
We're lucky.
I'm in bed by like 7:30. Terrible.
If you want, Chris, for your own, I don't know how if you're planning on how you're planning on using the recording, but you could stop it and then restart it after all the like audio nonsense and everything.
Ah.
So
Hey. All right.
Now, nice to talk to you guys.
Yes. So we were just kind of recapping. The couple here, they are in Turkey. It's probably 11:20 p.m. You remember? Oh no! What?
Okay, I'm here.
Was that like your logo? What just happened?
Oh, I don't know. Was it?
Yeah.
GF like.
Yeah.
We got an ad.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, no.
We don't have the pro version of Gary Stockdale, so we
I
have
know.
to do it.
Yeah,
Is there any more we could fuck around with? Like,
we're good, man. We're good.
yeah, me too.
Maybe we could just kind of go through with each of us the general. So since age groups are like our kind of focus for this, what is the primary age group we work with? So maybe you want to start with you, Jeremy?
Sure. So I would call. Oh, sorry, Jeremy. There are two
No,
Jeremys.
I'm sorry. It's fine.
I would say my age group is adult, so kind of 18 to 118. Yeah, that's it.
All right. So a big swath.
Yep.
For me, the majority is high school age in America, so 9 through 12, so 14 to 18. I probably have a higher concentration of 14 to 16 than the upper group. One-on-one clients, it's weirdly my age, so like mid 30s to like mid 40s, and then there's like the over 60 kind of crowd. So I have worked with an 8-year-old though. It's probably my youngest.
Nice.
So, G-Funk?
Well, I work with a pretty broad swath of ages as well. I go as early as 6 months, and all the way up to my oldest student was 92 when he started.
Nice. That'll be an interesting topic of variation.
I know. I think mainly though, I work with probably the 6 to 12 age group for the majority, but that's just based on schedule and not being able to work with them for long term. But yeah, either way, everything in between.
Okay. And Seb, I'm going to call you Sanders and Fine. I think it'll make easy.
That's fine.
Seb Sanders.
Or that Sanders, I don't know. Go first?
You go first.
Okay. That's awesome, Gary. 6 months. But I think similarly large grouping. I think the youngest I've regularly taught is 3, and the oldest is like 63, 65, something like that. But more generally in the like kids to young adult range, so probably something like 10 to 20s.
Okay.
Like
And I teach mostly from 22 to, I would say, 40, like mostly. And only this summer I got to teach some kids between 9 to 16.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was different. But mostly like 30-ish.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We might too, or maybe just kind of go what we do, like quote unquote, what is the thing that we're training? So if we go back to Seb Sanders, so Seb, is all of that pole or is it more than pole?
Selen. So is my sister.
Sorry.
That's fine though. This age group is mostly pole, all pole. Okay. But I've worked with hip hop too. Like I taught hip hop to people from again 20 to 26. Okay. Mostly. Uh-huh.
So would you categorize that as performance based? Like
no, hobby.
Okay.
Yeah. Whoever I teach is mostly for the hobby reasons.
Okay.
You know, sports and hobby purposes.
Do you think that they're looking to do it to get a workout or to do something?
With pole dance, half of my students are looking for a workout. The other half and the hip hop part is just looking for some fun, you know.
Okay.
Some fun with movement that regards to music as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Sanders, it's mostly parkour.
Yeah, I would say mostly parkour. Started recently delving into martial arts because I have a pretty long martial arts background as well. But yeah, 99% parkour.
So with this 3-year-old, like, how does that work? A parent comes in and is like, I have this kid, I want him to do something.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it two ways. Both are different but enjoyable in their own way. The first is this kind of thing, like a private lesson or something. And really it's just like similar, where you might assess like a personal training client, see where like their strengths and weaknesses are. You do the same thing with the kid, but you're just doing it as like as a game the whole time. You know what I mean? And playing with them and seeing like, okay, can they climb? Can they jump? What's this like? What's their balance? How's their fear of heights? What's, you know, how can they roll? Do this kind of stuff. And then from there, you know, just progressing normally. The other way I've done it is, which is a nice way, if it works out, is it's like a family class style. So that one you're teaching like the kids and the parents. And so the fun balance there is to like challenge the kids, but also challenge the parents, because sometimes the parents can try and take a back seat to like their kids' enjoyment. But I think it's important that both parties are pushing themselves in their own way, you know.
That is incredibly interesting. Does anyone else have a family style program that they do?
I hate families.
Too many, right? Too many things to, but I actually think that's really brilliant.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Built into
it's cool when it's done well. So what was that, Gary?
Oh no, I was saying that built into the aquatic stuff with the 6 months to 1 year.
Yeah, definitely.
It's mainly parent and baby at that point in time, so it's a lot of dual education. So
very cool.
But at that stage, they're blobs that are slowly coming into consciousness, and it's about shaping that around the scale of manipulating water and holding breath and that sort of thing.
So that goes to my other. So with the 6-month-old, they don't just literally like Lion King style give you their baby. They go in the water with their own baby.
Yeah, from 6 months to a year, that's really the only education that we'll allow for, because physical characteristics aren't really developed yet. So by the time they're 1, most kids can walk, and if you can walk, you can swim. So by the time they're 1, then it opens up the opportunity for them to just Lion King their baby to you, and then you just take the reins.
That's so funny that you say that, because Nick and I were talking earlier, and she was like, well, gait is the same as swimming. And I didn't think of it that way, but then I did. And then I thought about what you do a lot in and out of the water. And it was like, yes, they're similar patterns.
It's just a slightly different medium, different thickness, but it's the same sort of programming. But yeah, it's all cross pattern stuff. So it all ties into those connections very similarly.
For those that work with younger people, other than this kind of family style, are the parents watching you work with their kid?
Sometimes. I've had both.
Yeah, generally yes for me. We have a pretty open dynamic between the parents and the students, where there's a lot of discussion about why we're doing what we're doing, educating them about the process as well, because with regard to swimming, people at large really have no idea how swimming really takes shape, and let alone how swim programming takes shape. So the relationship that we keep between the parents and us, and the students and us, is a very intimately fine woven thing. But there are people in the industry and swim schools that don't do that, just take the parents the fuck away, because they realize that it's going to be somewhat loud. Their child is going to be uncomfortable and angry about it. But then it's about building bonds still. So it's always about that relationship between the student and the instructor, and then how the parent perceives everything at large. So, but it's very complicated in a number of different ways for those reasons. Whether you have the parents on deck or whether you haven't gone away,
right.
There are a number of different issues either way.
Like pros and cons of how involved they are, how involved someone outside of this session is.
Yeah.
Like I think it could go the same the other way. Like let's say that you're working with a parent and they got to bring their kid in, right? It's I don't know how many of you. I haven't necessarily have that. Actually, it's strangely most of the people I work with don't have kids, or when I work with them they didn't, and then once they had a kid, it was very strange in that. And I guess it's niches, but or niches, however you want to pronounce it. Once they had a kid, then they became a part of like mommy fitness culture. And I don't know if anybody else has. I can't, and I can't be like, but it's interesting. So the same person that was getting, you know, good results and was understanding things in a certain system, now you bring a child into the fold, and now you want to segue into something that is uniquely your own or is catered to you. It's just an interesting concept to me in general.
Yeah.
But
the mommy fitness thing drives me fucking crazy. Just because it's not, you're not actually paying attention to self. There's this other external thing that you have to attend to while also conducting your body in a way that's either more or less ideal. If you're actually looking for appropriate results or goals, you got to be focused almost entirely on you. But then again, having a child is the act of saying, I'm not going to focus on me entirely anymore, and most of my focus is going to go towards the child. You know?
Yeah.
I don't think we have that mommy fitness here, guys.
interesting.
I don't know what you're talking about. Like,
So it's in general, what I'm referring to is typically work. And this is how I've seen it outdone. It might not be out this way all the time, but there'll be a trainer or trainers, and they'll be female. And these trainer or trainers then have a baby. So then they kind of rebrand themselves to like do fitness with their baby. And then they will attract other people who were gym goers who also have just had a baby. And so it's
like a club.
Correct. But they will like, and other than, you know, making the gym baby friendly. Like, I don't know if they're lifting their baby. Like, I haven't actually seen it, but it's branded as like mommy fitness. So the fact that you don't separate yourself from your kid all that much during your workout.
I don't know. I'll jump on the feminist, the defense of women here, I think.
As you would. I love it.
One of the most common things I've heard from new moms is the feeling of like being like imprisoned in your home with this new child, and you're the one to take care of them, and you can't leave the house because you can't put the baby down. So just putting myself in that person's shoes, I can imagine having any way to get out of the house and feel like I can still connect with what I used to do as either a hobby or to keep myself mentally or physically healthy. I can see how that would feel very supportive.
Yeah, I would agree. I wonder, so I guess this, when would that ever end? When they go to kindergarten? Right? No, I mean, I'm really trying to like, so is this your thing until you can be separated from your child again?
Maybe.
I mean, it's like breastfeeding, you know, it can go on for a certain length of time, and then after a certain, it's too much, maybe a little weird.
Yeah.
As only if you don't have matching outfits. That's when it gets weird.
Yeah.
I had a student who had a baby, I believe, a year ago, because the baby is now 1 year old. So yes, and she came back to the studio, and while the kid was like 8 months old, she participated in teacher training course. So she was with us, and for the exam, for example, she had to take the baby here too. So, which was nice. We had fun, you know, and she took the exam too. And I asked her, oh, you know, it's so good to see you here again. And she's like, yeah, it's 1 year old now. We can actually have like separate lives. You know, we don't have to like depend on each other. You know, I was depending on the kid a little bit as well. And this is good now that it's changing. So I'm back here, you know, on my own, which is, what is it? Which is good and bad for her too, because she has to get used to this as well, not just baby.
I'm curious, like kind of following this trend. Do you? Because I kind of see pole as a purposefully sexy kind of thing, right? Definitely sensuality involved in it. Do you get a lot of, is it mostly single women? It's mostly women, am I correct?
Yes, it is mostly women.
Do you mostly get non-family women, or do you get a
we
lot
get
of,
all sorts.
okay.
I have like single students. I can't even like say, oh, this one is the most, because it's so out there. Like, and some of my students, like, they hate the sexy part of it. They don't want to do it. And because it's actually in contact with metal a lot, which is like
not the most comforting.
It opens up your like what's the other side of femininity? Masculinity.
Oh,
masculine. It opens up your masculine side too, unless you're actually searching for your sexy side, because the metal just gives you, you know, stuff.
Interesting.
It is very interesting.
Jereme, tell me your age range again. I'm sorry. Fine.
No worries. 30.
Yes.
I said 18 to 118, but yeah, I mean, most of my clients are, let's say, like 30 to 50. But I'll welcome anyone within that age range.
Do you notice any differences in interaction between, say, a 30-year-old and a 50-year-old?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's start there. What is it that you've noticed?
I would say one of the most common things is the older the client, the more they're able to kind of put things and put advice in perspective, maybe. So they might see receiving advice as just one step in a process where they would also be giving me advice, or kind of a back and forth conversation. Whereas the younger the client, I tend to find either they want to be told what to do, or don't want to be told what to do. And there's not as much nuance there.
Okay. So the older person knows they're older than you, knows they have certain wisdom, but also inherently knows there's a gap in what they know about training the body.
Yeah. So yeah, have that wisdom as opposed to knowledge. Like they know that they know a lot, and they know that they don't know a lot, and that's a good starting place.
Okay. Anybody else mirror that?
Working in the rehab field, kind of with at least the older population, I think it's 40 to 70 and 80 are the age ranges I work with a lot in rehab. But there is that they have some perspective to give. But then the PT clinic isn't necessarily the place that affords them the opportunity to share all of that, because they're there for a very specific reason, very specific purpose. They're going through their treatment. So really, I found out that that aspect of my movement career was more of just them coming to me and the practitioner I worked with for our specific advice and guidance. So, but every now and again, like someone would slip out, like back in my day, and they just try to tell me what's going on with life. I'm like, yeah, no, I get that too. Cool, this is fun. But yeah.
Do you think working with someone of a similar age as yourself, that they automatically relate to you more, or you relate to them more?
I don't know. I can and can't relate with a lot of ages. Just there's so many different dynamics and places and walks of life that people come from. There's certain things that connect, but then somebody could have a wild perspective that I just don't resonate with whatsoever. But still, we're in the same age. Like for example, my wife and my brother are the exact same age, but like maturity wise, they're like 15 years different. So I guess it all depends.
Selen and Sanders, for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty personal thing, but I feel like there are definitely trends, kind of like what Fine was talking about. The youngsters can be a little more overt about, how best they receive and interact in this kind of, setting where we're trying to teach them something. But to be fair, it's like weird when you get the older ones in parkour, at least, because it's already not something that is perceived for them to go into. So they're usually like really pretty gung-ho about everything, but also still very verbal about, you know, their perceived limitations and fears. I mean, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the guy, but the dude that we trained with, Jim,
yeah,
you know, similar to like this, like he was all about it, but he was also definitely very afraid about like what might happen.
Yes.
Which I think is a when you get a little bit more with older people, but you also can get this with anything. Like I can get, you know, 5 and 6-year-olds and 10-year-olds and 17-year-olds but they just express that in a different way. You know?
Yeah, this idea of being stuck in your ways, right?
Yeah.
And or like if you're 16, you had a fear. Your fear is compounded by 60 years.
Exactly.
I guess that's why I'm also curious with you two is, it seems that pole and parkour are kind of almost specified niches within like the fitness industry. So I would assume if somebody comes to one of those classes, they are in, like you said, gung ho. They are into something new and something that they don't know about and something that they would probably have a lot of difficulty doing on their own.
Yes, of course.
I would generally say they are super open. The one thing I miss sometimes is like when I get like private lesson students or kids sometimes that are just there to like learn a flip or something, for example, or the way they saw parkour and like that's what they just want to be like Assassin's Creed already.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, yo, bro, you can't even hang for 5 seconds. Like it's gonna take some time.
Yeah. And they really don't like, especially they don't like reality. They don't like when you like put that at them. I tend to call it's an Instagram culture where they want the picture. They don't understand all the stuff that went behind it, and they're not interested in it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, kids these days with technology, it's very, very different. When I remember, and again, it's removed, but when I remember myself at 14, 15, it wasn't much like these 14 or 15-year-olds that I work with. And so it's very interesting in that when there's a big age group, and I would say 25 years, I just turned 40. So 25 years age difference, to know you're different and to know that they're not like you, like the further they are from me in age, the more I have to kind of listen and pinpoint and see exactly where they're at and also where they perceive they are at. Because I can't cross-reference it with myself, because the more I work with people, I'm like, there's very little people that are kind of like me, especially with people that you work with. Yeah,
no, for sure.
It's interesting. I had kind of the opposite in the juggling world. I feel like the Instagram culture worked in the opposite way, where when YouTube came about, at least, all of a sudden, like a few years into YouTube, all of the most technically skilled jugglers in the world were like 12 years old, because they had like infinite time on their hands and could see anyone doing anything they wanted, and all of a sudden the world was possible to them. So that was interesting.
Do you think it was just deliberate practice on their part?
Yeah, just knowing something's possible. Like you see people doing it instead of just like hearing legends. You can see it on your screen. You can watch it over and over again. And then you just go in your backyard or a racquetball court and spend your days.
Do you think because of and I don't know if I'm correct in describing it that way, but the lack of risk involved in juggling versus the risk involved in climbing a pole or parkour, do you think that makes it more accessible to young people to do on their own?
That's interesting. I feel like that's a question for Sanders.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to say not really. It's just what resonates with them. You know what I mean? Like, I was one of those kids because I started parkour at like 13. There wasn't anything there, nobody to teach or anything, and I just literally went to school and trained. And then when I was too sore to train, I played video games. And then once I was not sore enough, I trained some more. And I just did this for like, you know, from 13 to 18 because I had absolutely no other responsibilities. And and you just get good when you have that time, and that's just really what you're into. You know what I mean? I wasn't distracted with girls or school or anything. I just kind of like, this is what I want to be doing, so this is what I'm doing. And I think that can happen with parkour, that can happen with martial arts. You can see people do that with swimming, with gymnastics, with all sorts of stuff. If it's just has to hit them the right way, you know.
Can we go around and say what our age is? Because I wonder if that. So fine if we start with you.
31.
Okay, so I'm 40. Gary?
I'm 34.
Okay.
I am 28.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm 30.
Okay.
I'm the youngest.
Yeah. I feel the same way. Like people are just, I'm like, I feel young.
I think you should celebrate more actually.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I've made it longer. And it's curious because, you know, when you guys speak like that, I wonder, because when I was 14, 15, it seemed like the option was sports. That was now this was like late 80s, early 90s. I lived in Chicago. We had Michael Jordan in the Bulls, right? And it was one of these, the parents, there was no AAU, like nobody was spending money. Like we had church league. I went to Catholic school and we had church basketball league, and that's what it was. It was to get us to play, but I also, kind of knowing my parents, it was to get us away, to give us something to do. And that was it. So I played softball and basketball, and what is the game you could do more on your own? It was basketball, because all you needed was the school hoop and a bat, and I would spend my summers there. So I think a part too with this age thing is what are people at certain ages willing to do on their own?
I also feel like there's a dynamic of resource that we're not necessarily tapping into, you know, where, you know, inner city kids, you know, probably have the, you know, all of the balls necessary to juggle, but maybe not into it because the culture doesn't necessarily wrap around it. They might get teased because of juggling, even though it's fucking lit. Like, yeah. And then, you know, it's that dynamic in the same way that limits people from doing an aquatic practice. You know, a lot of places don't necessarily have pools, and because of that, they avoid that education. They can avoid that education. Whereas, you know, Australia, for example, it's government mandated that people have to take swim lessons because it's a public health safety or a public health risk thing. So there's that cultural component that also feeds the movement pursuits more broadly, I think.
100%.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take, as I remember just how culture and society works into things. So I used to live back in Chicago. I lived at this like intersection of several different towns. So, a couple of them were rough, and we were like the more middle SES. And I remember they redid a playground, and they put 4 new basketball hoops in. And then what happened is the inner city kids, it's suburbs, but it's the rougher neighborhood kids were like, they got brand new hoops. They started coming. And then the city took them out because they were like, we don't, right? So all that was left was on tennis courts that had hoops on the other. So what was left was tennis. So, well, what color are tennis people typically, right? So it was either, they used them for either hockey or tennis. So that was a very like, wow, like people are kind of dicks in that way to who they shape and mold, allowed to do what. But I guess you never really know what people do behind the scenes, right, on their own. Like for that inner city kid who is attracted to juggling, is he doing it on his own? Like, would that be something that would be practiced independently and behind closed doors and kept for yourselves?
I used to play a lot with like yo-yos, and I would not do that in public, you know, but I would lean in when I was at home. But I guess that's kind of like one of those things. You know?
Yeah, I think it's.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. I think it definitely, you know, something that you can work on your own, but it always helps to have at least someone supportive in what you're doing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So like, even if it's your dad or your mom saying like, oh, that's cool, or like some random, you know what I mean? Like, there's probably something somewhere that is giving him a little bit of like external validation, at least in the beginning, or someone to like look up to, or this kind of thing, because I think it makes it easier, other than really feeling alone, like with the juggling, you know, just completely. That's a hard thing to push through, I think.
Do you feel that wanes with age? The kind of the wanting versus the needing. I feel, especially with like my, I would say upper 50s, early 60s group, they're more, they take the quote unquote health factor a little bit more. Like, I'm doing this for my health. I'm doing this so I don't need a heart attack. And and they don't necessarily, they don't need validation elsewhere. They almost relish in doing it for themselves. Whereas, right, my 8-year-old, if his dad didn't come, and his dad was on the phone most of the time, but if his dad didn't come, he probably wouldn't be that into it.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think it varies. Personally, I feel like it was almost I was a pretty like aggressive kind of fuck you to the people as a kid, and like I was even telling Selen this a while ago and came up just recently, but like when I was training, like maybe there's a couple times where I'd be like balancing nearby the road, and I even had like people throw like, you know, big gulps from 7-Eleven at me, like while I'm balancing and honking and like stuff like this, and you know, people telling me that I should stop and I'm gonna hurt myself. And even like the closest thing I had to a father figure, like one of my martial arts teachers, wonderful guy, but in the very beginning he was like, yeah dude, you need to like stop this because this is crazy. Years later, thankfully, he was like, I'm glad you never listened to me. But I think, you know, it depends on the kind of person. You know, you get some people that are fighters or maybe a little bit more aggressive, and like they'll respond back with like, well, fuck you, I'm going to show you anyway kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then there's the kind that like really like to have a little bit of support. But I think obviously the long term, for anything to be long term, the motivation needs to eventually begin to shift intrinsically versus extrinsically. So
they had that reaction because nobody else was doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, nobody else is doing it. They didn't understand it. A lot of jackass stunt comments in the beginning as well. Like,
and I guess I'm trying to get into their mindset. Was it like, who's this kid showing off? Where like you just needed an outdoor place, right? Like,
yeah, I don't know, man.
We're here drinking Slurpees, and this guy's, you know, and it's weird, and you know, is that it's an interesting thing that people, the comparisons for kids are there's no why, only why not in their mindset. There's no all they know is that they're not playing as much as this person, like a volleyball team. This is what they register. They have no semblance of that person's a lot better player than me. Like, that is not in their like register. Just that this is happening to this person and this is not happening to me. And it tends to be very external, and you like them better, and it's really hard to be like, do you not understand that they're a better player? Because you know, you can't hurt someone's feelings, but then it's also like, how do you not know? Like, the ball has hit the ground around you 12 times in a row. Like, it's very, and maybe it was just a certain population, but this was something, because I work with this age group all the time, but when I work with the volleyball team, difference than when I work with PE. And I think it's the generalization of the types of kids and what was expected and what they thought was deserved and what the jersey meant. So even within the same age group, getting different personalities, like you're saying, I think is
100%.
It's always a human thing, right?
Definitely. I mean, I'm very interested in, like, from the pole side of things, just because obviously like parkour is a pretty male dominated thing.
Yeah.
So when we're like talking about marketing stuff, like other than the fact that I've usually marketed stuff in the US and Dubai, and I have no idea how Turkey works really. But secondarily, like, they're all 99% female, and they're all usually a little bit older. So it's really like how they respond to each other. She told me like some time where like one person couldn't make the time slot, so like she was able to get all the other girls to not show up to the class as like kind of like a form of protest kind of thing. And like this kind of like, I have not ever had any inkling of this amount of like viciousness, and I've even dealt with like, you know, angry parents, you know what I mean? Like, so it's interesting to me that these things as well.
I think what my students are kind of beyond validation point. So like, even if they're 22, even if they're 45, they're like either sharing it with the world and they don't care who thinks what and they're fine with it, or they don't show it to anybody and they just do it for themselves, not looking for any external stuff.
Yeah.
I really don't know the other way. And it's such a like close sport, you know?
Right.
Yeah, we're there, but we're a small majority. Everybody knows everybody after 2 weeks, and then you get to see each other in like your underwear basically.
Yeah.
And you have to hold each other in a safe position that connects you in a very different way. Either like, for me, sometimes I feel like either more than a teacher, like just either a friend or a big sister, or sometimes I feel the motherhood, you know, inside of me. So it's really character development for me as well. But I wouldn't say they do it for the validation, no.
Yeah. You know, this concept of identity. So, right, I could say identity of PE class kids are ones who didn't like the traditional model of, I'm going to play a team sport, I'm going to weightlift, like I want something else. So the kids that are more cerebral, more want to get into your body. If you think about pole and parkour, again, the identity in a close-knit group because it's less than. I'm not sure if juggling, or if you use that, is the juggling community also identity-based, where I'm a juggler and I feel kinship with other jugglers. And same with swimming. Is that another, like, I'm a swimmer, I belong to this swimming community, or is it just something that people do?
Yeah, when you guys were talking about the certain personalities that get into a particular type of movement and you know, seeking external validation and that sort of thing, we, at the swim school I work at, we try to develop this sense of community between everybody, and you know, everybody's swimming, and then we have group classes where people are swimming together, and they're creating like an even tighter community within this bigger community of this swimming establishment that we have. And I feel like there's always going to be some sort of drive to adhere to or participate in a particular movement or type of movement or what have you, based on the people that you get to do it with. You know, there's always this community where you can enjoy things on your own individually, but at some point in time, you're going to want to express with others, just because we are so social. There's an impossibility otherwise. And to what Jereme was saying about the Instagram and the YouTube community, it's almost built into it, where like you're watching these people and you get to interact with them socially online or not. So it's less face time, but it's still that same community that you're getting in with. It's just this feeling of belonging that also goes along with what types of movements you participate in. Yeah, it's so intimately there.
Well, something
I think
else.
we are a good example for it, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, because Sanders, in Turkey, do you work out of a school? Do you or is it
now? Yeah, now it's just an academy. In Dubai, we were working out of private schools. In San Antonio, was my own business, just indoor and outdoor classes. But Gary, you brought back some good memories, thinking like, because back in the day, there wasn't like any other people training in San Antonio, for example, for some years, but I was totally lighting up the message boards and this kind of thing. So yeah, good stuff.
fine. Are you the only one then that doesn't have a school academy community around him?
I don't think it's a coincidence that the juggler is the one who went off to work for myself and teach out of a physical therapy studio that's like 8 feet big, and one person comes in at a time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was wondering, do you still get a lot of juggling people, or?
No. I don't really teach juggling anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah, I do think. First of all, I thought it was really interesting that you described kids who are cerebral as wanting to get into their bodies, which I think is much more accurate than how most people see that as like a divide, like either you're cerebral or you're in your body. And I think there's a lot of overlap there. But yeah, for jugglers, there tends to be the culture and the community is very much you're on your own. So you go to a juggling festival with hundreds of people from all over, and you mostly just do parallel play. Like you're just standing alone and there's someone next to you standing alone. And then you make awkward conversation for a bit because you don't really have the tools to make the conversation. And then you go back to practicing on your own.
Yeah. I think that the concept of social is, if we kind of come back to that in the different age groups, homeschooled or not, that has its own tendency of it. But I feel the older people are using you as their social outlet. Like if it's an older person one-on-one, like you're, I don't want to say paid for friend because it would make me sound, but you're someone that they see regularly. And for me, at least, one-on-one folks, it's never like to business. It tends to be like, how are things going? And they have this bounce back, because when you think about it too, if you're not in school, where do your friends come from? Right? If you leave high school and if it's not from college, then it's from work. But where does that social come from? So I think that's because an 8-year-old doesn't care if you're your friend or not. But that 62-year-old who's retired might be looking for that in some way.
I don't know. I have a lot of like little kid friends. I have like a shit ton of like 3, 4, and 5-year-olds that I'm just down for. Like they're my mom. So I have a slightly different experience of it. And then it's a relationship. So any relationship that you maintain has a certain amount of a hey, how are you? But then it gets down to like what do you offer more specifically to their experience based on like who you are and what you represent, right?
True. Selen, you were going to add something?
Yes. It depends on what they're actually looking for. Like, are they looking for fun? Are they looking for exercise? Just today, I heard one of my friends who is also giving private lessons lose a customer, student, let's say. I don't like the word customer, student, because the student said, why would I have private lessons with you? You don't even talk to me after the lessons. We don't chat, she said. So
yeah,
that's actually a valid point, because some people, they go to do the exercise, but also like for the socialness too. They do want the community, and if you're not that one, they're like, okay, I'm gonna find another one.
Yeah. That's funny. The gentleman that I'm referring to, that the only reason he even became a client of mine is because at the old gym where I used to work at, I would actually, while I was waiting for my client, we would actually just talk to each other. Like he's riding the bike and give me the hey wave, and instead of just hey, we would just, what's up, what's going on? So that's interesting that you mentioned that.
I have a question for Jereme, juggling Jereme, regarding like the physical therapy world. I know you're getting deeper into it, but I feel like there's a certain line where people cross where you can tell that they're just trying to talk and tell stories to you, and they're not necessarily interested in the education aspect of like the movement training that they're there to represent. And it kind of parallels what you were talking about with Chris, where they're there for a social dynamic. I mean, I know a lot of patients that I've had, could give a fuck less the exercise stuff I'm talking about. They're just doing it because it fills the time while they're talking to me about life. But what's your experience of it?
Yeah, I think so. To be clear, I guess I am working out of a physical therapy office. I'm not a physical therapist, and I'm getting clients separately. So they're not necessarily walking into like a PT world, even though that is the physical environment. But having said that, I think it takes a lot of humility to recognize that like it's not about the tools that you have that you think are generally great for humans. It's about how can you match whatever you have access to what that person walks in needing or wanting. And what I find is the less attached to tools I get, the more I start to realize when someone is just telling me a story or just asking me a question. Like two different people can walk in and say like, how was your weekend? And one person can be making small talk before like, all right, let's get to it. And the other person can be like, I really just want to talk about our weekends. And like, maybe I just want to tell you about my weekend. Yeah.
And you can never, it's very delicate how to encourage their talking in continuation and like segueing into, like a lot of times I'll be like very active listening, but then I'll like get on the ground and like pat the ground and then they'll continue talking and like get on the ground. Like it's yeah. And I see some knowing heads, because you never want to cut them off. Right. It's a very delicate process. Another thing, and kind of segueing here or there, it's like 2:07. I'm not sure about your availability, but this concept of making the singular choice to show up to training. So if you think of that like 6 months old through like 12, right? Their parents bringing them. So their parent is that pusher. When you get to 20s, 30s plus, physical therapy or not, right? Even if you think about that 50-year-old who has been deemed physical, you have to take physical therapy now. Is there necessarily still a choice to be there on their own accord? Is it because something is wrong and a doctor said you need this that they're saying yes, versus someone coming in off the street and just being like, I really want to learn more?
For me personally, that's something that's one of the things I most enjoy about working with adults is you're talking to the person who is your client, and from the time they are a prospect to the time they've been a client for 10 years, you're talking to the same person who has their own goals and needs and whatever. Whereas there's this kind of like disconnect when you're working with a kid whose parent is paying for it and bringing them there. And there's kind of this like inherent complication of, am I a service provider? Am I working for the parent? Are they working for me? Like, what is this relationship? So that isn't to say like, kids need a lot of help. And I'm glad there are adults working with kids, but just part of the personal joy I get out of working with adults is like getting down to what they actually do want. So I find that the older the client, the more they'll just openly share what they want. Like, hey, I just want to be your friend. Like, let's just talk about my weekend. Whereas all the way up through myself and older, there are people who are saying like, I want to be stronger and more mobile. And what they mean is like, I want to look better when I go to this party, or whatever variety of masks people put over things.
So are you saying that the older people get, generally the more they're aware of what they want?
Maybe the more comfortable they are sharing.
Okay.
But it takes less, it's like fewer layers to peel away to get to what they really want.
Got it. Particularly without this go-between of a parent or et cetera that has a...
I blended 2 points together. So that's true within my population. So of adults within that population, the older they get, the more willing they are to share. I think the average 8-year-old walking around will tell you exactly what they want.
Yeah.
But that's not who I see. Yeah.
Ice cream right now.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that, I agree with Jereme on the notion that, with the youth, like they're not paying for the classes, so at some level, they need to find some sort of inherent value in what's actually going on before they actually start wanting to do it. And, a lot of the times it's because they've built such a bond with their teachers. Me, and speaking from experience, yeah, I've parents telling me that like their kid is talking about me the entire week and all of the things that we're going to do and work
Gary.
on. Exactly, Mr. Gary, teacher Gary. It's just that. And so like and typically, which is fun for me, and because of the age range I get to work with, I'm typically their first teacher ever. You know, so I have a very important role in ushering them into the world of trusting other humans to be looking out for their best interests. You know, so and then they also start to enjoy the things that we're working on together. So it's not only that I represent this world of the aquatics that they get to dive into literally and figuratively, but it's also a very close personal relationship that we have as I'm ushering them through all of these points of awareness. So yes, the parents may start them off that way, but it's really me and our relationship that keeps them there and keeps them motivated and keeps them interested. And you know, as they start to progress into the skills of competitive swimming, it's the higher standards. It's like, you know, I expect this level of you. I know right now today your energy level is this, but we need to be this together. And you know, it's like I have a dog in the fight, and if they can see that I have a dog in the fight and that I really care about it, they're going to be more willing to do it, whether or not their parents paying for it or what have you. But that takes a lot of experience of one another before that becomes like the nature of the relationship.
Selen Sanders, input there?
I mean, I think parkour, it's starting to shift to the more normal thing, but has dodged a bullet as far as youth getting into it, because most of the time the adults have no idea what the hell it is. So it's the kid that wants to get into it. And other than the potential, you know, not really realizing how work intensive it can be, you know, depending on what they want to be able to do.
Right.
I don't really have too many problems getting kids that are, you know, hard to access or this kind of thing. I've actually noticed a little bit of a different thing from what Fine was talking about, where I feel like my youngest, like, you know, youngest ones until they get to like the teens, and then, you know, after maybe 35, 40s, as they're starting to like simmer down, I feel like they're the ones that are easiest for me to reach, and the ones that like have, I guess, the more complicated lives are usually the ones that are more full of like uncertainty with what they necessarily want and what they prioritize any given moment, at least when it comes to training parkour, you know. Because I feel like I've had way more dedicated students in the younger and the older ranges than I ever have
in the mid.
In like from, you know, I start to lose them at like 17 when they're thinking about college and all this kind of stuff. And then, you know, when they have these kind of day jobs, and then after, you know, they've been a professional for a while and they're in a comfortable place, you know, mid-30s and stuff, then I feel like they start to do more things for themselves and actually can dedicate themselves to something that actually, you know, takes a little bit more than an hour, you know, a week to get good at or something.
Do you think, following up with that leads to this idea of like hopes and dreams, right? So as a young kid, where you can be anything you want, right? And again, put the time in that you want to be anything, where in that young group, that's still open. And then as they get to that mid-teen, and again, the comparisons or this and that, or life shows up and you have to become an adult, that maybe there's no more time or room for this. Or, you know, when you talk about in that middle, then in the middle, you're figuring out your life, like how I survive independently. And then maybe older, like maybe I can't be this thing. I can't be a professional parkour athlete, but I really like this. And now I have the resources to kind of come back to it. I wonder if there's pieces to that.
Yeah, no, it definitely could be. I mean, I know I've felt it myself, just being pulled in so many different directions, and the same thing happens to them and to all of us, right? So, I mean, I know lots of kids, usually it's like college, you know, that's getting, you know, what are you going to do with parkour? You need to be thinking about college, and then so then they're, you know, heading off to college or doing this kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's just another step in the journey, but I think it's important, kind of, as what Gary was talking about, is making sure that like especially with the young ones, like our experience with them, like you bring that passion. Like I've seen too many coaches like in gymnastics and in parkour where they think like for coaching, parkour is probably the easiest way to make a living with parkour is coaching. You know, that's the most accessible. To do performance work or to do commercial stuff has to be another thing, you know? So, and it's obviously way less of the population wants you to be in a commercial or do a live performance than wants you to teach their kid how to jump on stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
So the tough thing I'm seeing then is where it is sometimes to people turning into a job. I see it a lot with gymnastics, with tumbling, and then a little bit with parkour, which is a bit tough and sad because like it's I had another coach describe it to me. It's like, we have no idea what the rest of this kid's or this person's life is like, you know? So it's really important that like, I feel like as much as I want to be the change I see in the world when I'm teaching anybody, but I think the kids are the ones obviously that are the future, that you need to like live that. Thankfully I love what I do and I love parkour, so it's easy for that to come through in it. But even in the days that I like feel like shit, like I remember one time I like threw my back out, I couldn't do anything for like 2 weeks, you know. I had to roll around with mobility stuff an hour before like just walking, you know, but still have to, despite being not as physically capable as I am used to, have to bring it, you know, so that the kids can be, you know, really there and engaged and show that like people actually care about them. You know, this was super relevant when I moved to Dubai because it's also such like a big nanny culture. So like they're raised by their nannies. They don't ever get to see their parents. And so like that comes out in different ways, and you need to like, I feel like it's important for people to know, because I know I didn't feel this way when I was a kid, that like other humans like can care about you. You know what I mean? It's not always like, what can this person do for me? It's like, how can I, you know,
or the fact that a surrogate is a thing. Like you can have a surrogate parent, like, and do I transfer that to my coach, any adult figure? I know for myself, and particularly with kids more so, is that the need to maintain a buffer. So where they might want to latch on and make you I don't want to be your friend. Like, and it, like the same, like for kids, like the period's over, like you have to leave, like gotta leave my office now. Like they will linger. And I mean, for some reason, I am like the Pied Piper of troubled freshman girls. Like it's just like they'll go to class and it's, again, such a trying of patience and what little thing can you get them to do. And you think that you don't break through because it's so minuscule, but the next year they're in your office every day just saying hi. You know, it's a very kind of peculiar thing. But I find that they're, particularly with younger folks, that you need to kind of create, if it's time, a buffer around yourself to separate. Like I don't think I could be as Gary is and like best friends of everybody. Like when we're on the clock, like I'm all yours. But when that punch out happens, like definitely need the separation. And I'm not sure if you guys feel similarly that it tends to lean towards that younger age group or older, or that idea for a buffer.
I think it always depends. Go ahead, Gary.
No, I was gonna say boundaries are healthy no matter what. You know, there has to be a dividing point where, you know, I can't give you this time anymore. You know, I have a lot of things that I'm devoted to. But in the context, I think what we're talking about with you, Chris, is that there's a very specific timeline to your day, and you're very locked into your office hours, and people coming in to see you, and you got a lot of stuff that you're working on at any given point in time. And you know, when I leave the swim school, I mean, I'm kind of like a public figure in that, you know, it's a very small town that I live in, so people are, you know, bound to talk to me outside of that. But I kind of relish those opportunities just the same, as talk to them more broadly about things. But yeah, I don't know. Like in the physical therapy world, kind of like akin to what you know, Jereme Feynman and I were talking about a second ago. Like I feel like there's constraints that are placed on relationships by virtue of the establishment that you're working through.
Yeah.
You know? So Like I got to get shit done. Like I can't just sit here and talk to you about this. Like we got to, push forward. So there's always that aspect of it that shoves the conversation in a certain direction.
And the whole idea of paperwork and insurance. I mean, I have experience with that. Like that's a whole other, right, non-people side that needs to get done. And you also want to get out of there. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really a real stark contrast for me. I went from working at 2 kind of like small boutique community gyms where you pay a monthly membership and then become friends with everyone who you work out with in group classes and everything. One a CrossFit and then one a one-off gym that you wouldn't have heard of. And there I was in a really weird position of being 25 to 30 years old and single. So in a lot of the like socializing with young people, all the other coaches are like, I'm going to go home to my family. And I'm like, how do I set boundaries with these people?
Didn't even think of that. Like people like literally, like not necessarily, not romantically, but like we're pals kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm like the natural pal. So it took me years to I don't even know if I ever figured it out. I left my jobs, but to figure out like how and when to set boundaries and how not to. And also I wasn't fully in charge of my own boundaries because I'm working for someone else. So whatever rule the gym sets or doesn't set, like implicitly and explicitly makes it somewhat clear maybe. And then going into the physical therapy world, like, again, I'm not in it per se, but the friend and person who owns the studio, watching her, like she's on a clock. The next person's in, and then I got to write my notes, and then I got to get home. So yeah, very, very different.
Well, we're at an hour 22, and I know my Turkish friends are very late at night there. Any last thoughts or comments from folks?
I want to ask something. Like, I know Jereme doesn't do it, but I'd like to ask you guys if you actually change the way you teach to kids or adults. Like, do you teach the same thing the same way you teach an 8-year-old, to a, 40 years old?
If I could field this one first, the language changes. The principles that you're looking for are identical, but how you describe it with imaginative vocabulary or straightforward technical terminology is really what changes over time, and it's about what that audience can absorb. Yeah.
Agreed. A lot of it, like I think Sanders was saying, the assessment, the kind of having them do something and recognizing, well, how are they doing it? What's going on there? The tasks, and it's very, the tone, it's more storyteller. It's more like, can you put this ball up on that block? Like that kind of thing that happens where I would talk regular to a 65-year-old, and to that 65-year-old, I would explain why I'm doing what I'm doing, versus the 8-year-old, I would just make it a game who doesn't really care about the ins and outs of the game. It's just, can you do this thing that I'm asking you to do? Or can you do it higher now? So it's always, with the kid, I feel it's always trying to find something that they can do and then keep one-upping that. Whereas an adult, I think one-upping, they know their limit. Like one success and it's like, all right, how do we swivel around this success versus keep ratcheting it up? Anything to add, Fine, on that, or?
I don't think I have enough experience. I guess I used to teach kids juggling, and I would certainly talk about it very differently. I would just echo what Gary said, I guess, about the language being the primary thing that changes. When I go to explain something to my nieces who are learning gymnastics now, immediately I'm like, before I open my mouth, I'm like, wow, none of the stuff I would say here will fit. Yeah. And then my own closing thought, I guess, would not be a question, but just a thank you to everyone who does work with kids. The only, like, in a lot of ways, I think it's the most important work that movement people of any kind can do. And I'm only comfortable in my own career because I know there are great people out there helping the kids. So appreciate it.
Wow, shucks. That's awesome.
Well, I get something out of it too, so it's not even just about like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we wouldn't do what we do and give what we give if we didn't get something back. So
I got kind of one closing thought too. This kind of goes out to everybody in the specific avenues of movement that you participate in and you advocate for. How early, if you had the opportunity to establish a culture around the types of movements that you participate in and you preach, how early would you get people indoctrinated into it or involved in it if you had the potential?
I don't understand the question.
At like what age?
At what age would you get people involved with the your specific avenue of movement? If you had a baby, this is like a fresh baby, how quick would you teach that baby to do what?
We have a fresh baby.
that's right.
Oh.
I have an answer right away, and if I can, it would be middle school. And why would it be middle school? Because I think of PE. Middle school is where it switches from general concepts to sports specific, sports and fitness. And then high school then is only sports and fitness, but more. So the change, to not specify and to not make it just one of these two avenues, the middle school would need to stop being that way. To stop saying, okay, now this is what you can do with your body. You could play sports or you can lift weights. That's right. However, I don't necessarily, know if I'd want to take on that middle school population, right? So I say like, here's where things shift. But on the other hand, I don't know if I would want to insert myself to do that work.
I think from the parkour perspective, just with it being as kind of generalist a movement as it is, I feel like the earliest is the best. I mean, even just today, I was like doing my own training. My friend Elliot was doing his baby was just crawling around on the gym floor, and there was like a little low rail that you can practice your balance on, and you could see this baby like putting, its hand on the rail and trying to reach over to the ground to crawl over it. So it's figuring out how to balance its weight and how to like accomplish this task. And I was doing the exact same thing as that baby. Obviously I was doing a completely different movement and this kind of thing, but like, I was like, okay, well, can I swing from this bar and land on that bar over there? Okay. How do I have to do this? How do I have to do that? And like, so I feel like I always felt this, but watching and seeing like this human grow a little bit, it's like such a cheesy line, but it's kind of the same thing. Like people will ask parkour this, and it's like, when did you start doing this? And then they're like, oh, well, when did you stop? And it's like, sadly, I think it's kind of true. Like we do stop really seeing what our bodies are capable of in movement capacities and conceptual understandings and interacting with the world. And so I think it just be like, just don't stop doing it, really.
Yeah.
Just keep supporting it.
Maybe that's the truest thing is we just need to stop immobilizing people.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like, a baby doesn't necessarily need a parkour class if they're allowed to play outside in the way. So if we stop penning them in, it could probably naturally happen or continue to happen.
And that's actually one thing I wanted to say about the last topic we had, where the language, like she kind of already said it, like I don't really teach the kids that much different than the adults. Like same with Gary and what Fine was talking about. Like, yeah, maybe the language will change a bit, but I even like to take that a step further. And like, I've definitely played games with like my 65-year-old students, and I've definitely gotten like down in like, you just have to do this drill with the kid, and like, okay, kid, like you cannot isolate your wrist from your elbow. You cannot even make a circle with your ankle without assisting it with your hand. Like, this is what we need to practice right now. So like, I feel like sometimes teachers can treat kids too much like they're dumb and give adults too much credit for what they might be able to understand.
Very fair.
And the reality is like much different. And it's fun to, as you get with them, it's fun to play games with adults and let them feel like that side of the love of movement.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's an awesome
as
point.
much as it is also to like realize like this kid can understand this concept of like where to leverage his weight and how to do this thing. Yeah, maybe I'm not going to tell him like, okay, I need to see like contralateral movement, and you have to be moving in the anterior plane and not shifting this, that, or whatever. But, you know, you can really get down and like nerdy with the stuff as well.
Well, because it ultimately all like factors into what they care about.
Yeah.
Right. So, and again, like if this kid cares about this move, he's going to do those things that you're saying because you're the coach. You know, and like, what does a 65-year-old care about? What does a 15-year-old care about? I had to use a lot of social clout and currency in order to get girls to do what I thought a volleyball player would want to be able to do. But they were like, we don't care about practice because it's only the game. Like a lot of different things. But how do you bridge what you're trying to teach to what they care about? Like, I think overarching, that's
how do you inspire them to care about it?
Yeah. When they care about nothing, how do you get them to care about something?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you'd probably get a lot of that with the teenage girls.
A fair share, yeah. But anything else?
I'm interested in the ideal age for polars to start.
Yeah. Honestly, people, we have these poles at the swim school, and like kids will get on those poles when they're like 2 years old and start spinning on that fucking thing. So like I would like
it's just an apparatus. Like they play with it. Yeah. Like we have a couple of moms bring their kids, and they do amazing stuff too. But you know, it's just like a cube. You give them a cube, they will play with it. Like. So, yeah, as long as they're interested, that's perfect. Yeah. But also, like, they need to, there's a danger here that they need to not actually focus on success, because when their bodies will change, so will their movements, and they will have to relearn everything. Like, there was a girl, but a really proper girl, like, she was so famous, I think, 14 years old. I don't remember her right now, like name right now, but she won medals, competitions on pole. She had a gymnast background, perfect. Boom, like the puberty hit. She got like her figure changed. She is different with hips, you know, like, and now she can't do the deadlifts that she used to do before. That was so easy for her. Like now her boobs get stuck. You know,
that is such a not really thought about point, but like the idea of puberty and how it just straight up whacks out your body and what you used to know.
Your proportions, like if you're like, there's a Russian split move, for example. You like the pole is this, you be the pole. this is the pole, and like if this is you, you get to put your feet here, do a split on air, and you have to balance. Like that. So your angle depends on how long your arms and your legs are, of course. Right. And then when that changed, everything changed. But the good thing is like she was trained in a way not to actually do it for the success, but do it for the love of it. So she did relearn everything, and she's still doing pole, and she's quite happy. But that's important, you know. Not that when it starts, but why it starts is important, I think.
And maybe
like, why did you start it? Because you want your daughter to have medals, or because she's genuinely interested in pole?
Right. And I think maybe that's the full circle, is that do they want to learn? Right? Do they want to do, or do they want to learn? Because you can be finitely done with doing. I got it. Then what? Versus I just want to keep learning stuff. So, and does that inherently get taper as you age, or does it broaden as you age? And I think, again, it depends on the person and the personality.
So I would say, like, whenever they're interested to play with a pole, they can do it, you know? Just for me, like with my niece now, it already starts. We're doing music, like drum, that's dance, you know? She's moving, she's dancing. When she's more able, we're gonna all dance together. And if she's interested with the silk, she's gonna do it. She's interested in a pole, then we're gonna dance with the pole. And then techniques come, you know.
And how
when
interesting.
she's ready, I have no idea. That's my sister's side to decide.
And how interesting are babies to play with and observe, because they're so pure, right? You just like, where are you looking? What is your feet doing? Like that's interesting to me as a being, to be like, I just want to like watch you do stuff, get up off the floor. And that's the best playmates, I think, because you know that you are working with the most unrestricted, tainted mechanism. So I think you want to capture it.
There's a funny thing, just like I said, when we were all training in the gym, she ended up puking on one sock. So Elliot took that sock off. So she's crawling around with one sock and doing kind of like a tri-pedal thing. So both hands and the free foot, but she's not using the foot that's the sock on. She's using the knee. And then eventually he takes the sock off, and now she's doing like the proper quadruped type stuff. So seeing like, she knows that she can't get good grip with these socks on. So she's not even trying anymore. Like, she's already past realizing this, and like, just super cool. Like,
the coolest,
intuitive.
They know everything. Things. They already, this is like we already have everything built in, and then we just neglect it and disregard it. So.
It's definitely interesting. Aside from all the fluids, it's super cool.
And the lack of sleep, which I would have a lot of trouble dealing with. Super cool, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you for chatting.
Thank you.
First of many, I hope.
Yes, agreed. We've got that 3:00 for those of you who will try to get into partnerships. And I think we have a nice mix of people who are in partnerships with movement people and who are not, to try to get different takes on it. But after this weekend, I'm sure I've got a few other topics in the kitty, plus some of Fine. So we'll get more emails and we'll get more scheduling going.
Sweet.
I'm sorry I'm not actually answering any of the emails. I'm just, through Jereme, I know what's going on.
And see, I understand, because the thing is though, here you are though. So consider everything answered. Awesome. All right. All right, I'm going to hit this end meeting.
Good night, guys, or good morning.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take it easy.
Good
night.
Bye.